All right, welcome to the Journey Machu Picchu Travel Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the differences between the Salkantay Trek versus the Inca Trail. So, my name is Michael, and we have here Robert.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert, the operations manager here at Journey Machu Picchu.
Okay, so we're both going to talk about the major differences between the Salkantay Trek and the Inca Trail. Basically because we have a lot of people who are looking to book the Inca Trail, but for some reason they can't or they don't do it early enough. So we're going to go over the pros and cons of each and why the Salkantay is a good alternative to the Inca Trail in case you can't book the Inca Trail. So to begin, we're going to talk about booking each of these treks. For example, the Inca Trail has to be booked basically 6 months in advance.
Well, one of the biggest advantages we actually have here at Journey Machu Picchu is that we get to travel and take each of these treks ourselves, so we have a lot of experience with them, right? So as Mike was saying, you do have to book it well in advance, right? The Inca Trail usually has to be booked at least around, what was it, 3 to 6 months in advance, right?
3 to 6 months. In this case, for the 2018 Inca Trail, we actually started having reservations and bookings in October of 2017.
Oh yeah, it's something that actually changed. Usually you have to wait until like January of each year. But nowadays what they're doing is they're actually starting a few months before. So it's even harder to get spots sometimes.
This was both good and bad because it wasn't such a rush in January to get spots for travelers, but at the same time, this made most of the spots or the permits run out early.
Yeah, they ran out. They ran out much faster actually. So in previous years, maybe people would start in January, and maybe there would be spots until for June, maybe until March, right? But this time they all ran out around early to late January.
Yeah, they were basically all gone. So, for example, if you wanted to book the Inca Trail now, there wouldn't be any available permits until mid-October. So, it's kind of like a pro and con. So that's one of the cons of the Inca Trail. If you have to know that you have to book it several months in advance. In this case, the previous year.
Which
Now,
also means that you have to make sure your schedule lines up with everything. So it's not even just booking it 3 to 6 months in advance. It's you maybe thinking about it even a year in advance because you don't know what your vacation times will be. You don't know how work is going to be. You don't know family time, right? So the best thing you can really do is try to check on it at least 5 and 6 months in advance, right?
it's, like you said, it's very difficult to know what's going to happen 6 months from now or a year from now. But like we said, that's the best scenario. The best way you can make sure you have a reservation. Now, the Salkantay is a different story. Um, it is available year round and upon request. Now, this isn't because the Salkantay trek isn't a nice trek by any means. It's because it's not as well known as the Inca Trail. So that's how those two compare in terms of booking. One, you're going to have to book it 6 months in advance, and the other can be readily available year round, but you still need to book it with anticipation.
Obviously, right? It fills up. And the main reason really for this being that the Peruvian government had to decide which was the main trail to take to Machu Picchu, right? So they decided on the Inca Trail, the classic Inca Trail. This meant that the spots are very limited. They tell you it's around 500 spots, but it's actually quite a bit less. So the thing is, really try to get it, like Michael said, around 6 months in advance, with the Salkantay having up to around 1,000 spots per day.
Good. So that basically brings us to how this was chosen. The government had to pick one particular trek to promote as the official Inca Trail. Um, in reality, there were various routes the Inca took.
Yeah, there's a bunch actually. There's many that actually go around, and they're still finding more even nowadays. Last time I went to Machu Picchu, they were actually excavating a new trail. They had recently found one about 6 months ago, but it takes quite a while to actually clear all the vegetation and make sure it's actually safe, right? But yeah, the government basically decided that the Inca Trail would be the main trail to be taken.
They both take you to Machu Picchu, um, and both of them were paths the Inca took. So um, they're both good ways to reach Machu Picchu. But just remember, it's not the only way to reach Machu Picchu, and it's not the official one. It's not like the Inca decided this is the official trek, and all other people taking another trek just can't enter Machu Picchu.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen that way. Then we have a point of accessibility. So both trails are demanding, but the Inca Trail is the easier of the two.
Mm-hmm.
It is a total of 26 miles from start to finish. Day 2 is the most difficult uh, because you reach the highest point in altitude during the trek. Um,
Yeah, that's true. The difficulty is a little bit different between each of them, right? Like Michael was saying, the Inca Trail is around 26 miles, with the Salkantay actually being almost twice as much, around 46 miles. Now, the thing is that as far as difficulty goes, this doesn't mean that you have to be someone that's super fit or triathlon runner, swimmer,
which we've had, but
which we have had. But it does help. I mean, it does help, but the pace of each differs, right? As you may or may not know, the Inca Trail is actually a day shorter than the Salkantay, right? So it actually paces out to be pretty much the same, right? Now the difficulty is a bit higher in the Salkantay, particularly because you actually go to a higher altitude on certain days.
On day two is also the most difficult day, just like the Inca Trail. You reach about 15,000 feet, a little bit over. It's about 4,600 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more difficult. It's a longer trail, but the trade-off is that the landscape is actually nicer. The Inca Trail has more ruins along the way, but the Salkantay is more nature immersive. You get to see more of the local flora and fauna. If you ever wondered where chinchillas come from, well, Peru has chinchillas living in the highlands, and it's probably the animal you'll see the most while taking the Salkantay. They're like rabbits running around everywhere. You won't really see that on the Inca Trail. So,
well, the thing is, like Mike was saying, you get to see a bunch of different landscapes, right? So the Salkantay is a little bit more of an alpine setting, right? So you'll see a lot more mountains, a lot of wildlife as well, right? But the Inca Trail is a little bit more of something called Ceja de Selva, right? Ceja de Selva is basically very close to the jungle.
Cloud forest, I think is the term.
Yeah, they call it cloud forest, right? But again, each one has, I wouldn't really call them pros and cons. I'd really say they're just amazing, but in different ways.
Good.
Right? Other than that, you do need to have at least a little bit of experience, right? This doesn't mean that you have to be like a triathlon runner, like we mentioned before, but it would be good for you to have at least try to get ready before you take these treks, right? So what does this mean? Basically, try to maybe work out a bit before you take a trek, maybe a few weeks in advance, just to get ready for the trek itself. You know, you are going to be walking between
8 kilometers per day.
8 kilometers per day, right? Which is about, I think, 3 miles.
3 miles.
Miles a day.
Doesn't sound like much, but when you're in the altitude and you're in 15,000 feet and you're hiking and climbing, you're gonna feel it after a few steps. So it's good to prepare.
Those 3 miles. Well, if you have taken a bit of, if you have taken a bit of time to actually get acclimated to the altitude, usually you take about 2 days to get acclimated before the trek. You should be fine. But either way, you are going to be at very high altitudes, So each step is going to be a little bit more difficult than what you're used to doing, right? So that brings us to our last point, right? Talking about the sizes, right? The groups themselves. Now, the Inca Trail and the Salkantay have a variety of different types of group sizes, right? The Inca Trail has 2 different sizes, while the Salkantay has 3. What's the main difference here? Well, looking first at the Inca Trail, we either have they're either usually private tours or large group tours, right? So the group tours themselves usually reach around, what is it, Michael? 8 to 15 people, I believe, right?
The large group Inca Trail?
Mm-hmm.
No, the large group Inca Trail can actually reach about 30.
30 people.
30. The one that can reach less than that is the Salkantay. So the Inca Trail is about, a large group can reach about 30 people, and a lot of travelers don't like that. So some of them opt for the private version of the trek.
Yeah.
Now, like Robert said, we have basically for the Inca Trail 2 sizes. The large group, 30, and then in private. Of course, private is going to be more expensive. Now, the Salkantay has something similar, but you can have 3 different classes. You have the large group, which can be max of 20.
It's similar sizes. It can be around 20 to 25 people with the largest group, right? But the thing is that sometimes it could even be less, right? It could be around 15 people. Then there's also the mid-sized group, right? Which can reach between 5 and 10 people, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we have the private groups, right? Which would just be you or your group or your family, the people you choose to go with, right? It really depends on what kind of experience you prefer.
Right. So basically, and of course, each one has a different price point. You know, if you want a large group, it'll be cheaper. If you want a small group Salkantay, it'll be slightly more expensive. And if you want a private one, of course, it'll be the most expensive version. And private tours or private treks also have different levels of amenities that you can have during the trek. You know, and that brings an additional cost. But yeah, those are the major differences between each. They're both great ways to reach Machu Picchu.
Yes.
One you walk in directly. The other one has you spend a night in the town called Aguascalientes, which is Machu Picchu town. It's at the bottom of Machu Picchu. And the following morning you hike up to Machu Picchu and reach the city.
That one's the Salkantay, right? So when you spend a night in Aguascalientes, right? The other one, the Inca Trail, you actually go through the Sun Gate to get there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The Sun Gates, I'm sure you've seen. In all like the famous pictures of Machu Picchu, you're going through the Sun Gate. Right? Again, that's because it's the classic Inca Trail that everyone wants to take. Right? But again, the end spot, the ending of all the treks is always going to be Machu Picchu itself.
Correct.
Right? So you can have your guided tour there, and you can even include something extra once you get there, which would be either the Montaña Machu Picchu, which is Mount Machu Picchu, or Huayna Picchu, right? Which, if you've seen the pictures, is the tallest peak there in most of the pictures of Machu Picchu.
Okay, well, good. Well, those were the major differences.
Mm-hmm. So, whichever you're interested in, try to do a little bit of research, try to make sure you have time, try to make sure your schedule fits, and good luck. All right, so I've been Roberts. This is Michael. Hope you had a good time with the podcast. See you around.
Bye.